We got an incredible bit of audio leaked today of remarks made by the acting Secretary of the Navy, Thomas Modly. Now remember, this guy only has the job, he's the acting Secretary of the Navy, and he's only there because the previous Secretary of the Navy, you may recall, resigned quite publicly after clashing with the president over the president's pardoning of war criminals back in November. So the guy who replaced him, this acting secretary, apparently had no problem with the pardoning of war criminals, and so he got the job. Well, today, the acting secretary was on the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Now that, of course, is the aircraft carrier currently docked in Guam that has an outbreak of coronavirus, an outbreak that was essentially ignored by Navy higher-ups until the captain of that ship, Brett Crozier, risked his career to blow the whistle last week. Crozier was summarily relieved of his command for essentially insubordination and embarrassing the Navy and the president. But his entire ship made their support for his actions very clear as they cheered him off a few days ago, leaving the ship. The captain has since tested positive for coronavirus himself. Today, Acting Secretary Modly addressed the entire crew of that aircraft carrier in Guam. And listen what he had to say about Captain Crozier.
If he didn't think that information was going to get out into the public in this information age that we live in, then he was A, too naive or too stupid to be the commanding officer of a ship like this. What the? The alternate is that he did it on purpose. And that's a serious violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which you are all familiar with.
By the way, that you did hear that correctly. That is a sailor on that ship reacting to those comments by saying, "What the F?" Now, the comments by the acting Navy Secretary have caused enormous blowback and controversy around the nation. I'm joined now by Democratic Congresswoman Elaine Luria of Virginia. She's a retired Navy commander herself. Today, she called on the Secretary of Defense to fire the acting Secretary of the Navy for making those comments today. Congresswoman, what so disturbed you about those comments that you would call for him to be fired?
Well, early this morning, when I first saw these out in social media, my husband showed them to me, and I thought, you gotta be kidding me. I thought this was literally something from The Onion, that the acting Secretary of the Navy could not have possibly flown halfway around the world to visit the aircraft carrier, speak over the 1MC, that's the announcing system on the ship, and berate the man that he has just fired. And we have seen the way in which the crew much loved Captain Crozier, and in a very difficult time going through a pandemic and where the crew is much at risk, he put himself out on the line to make sure that the crew got what they needed to stay safe. And the Secretary of the Navy flying forward to do that has so many far-reaching effects. Not only on the crew of the Theodore Roosevelt, but I have heard from dozens of my former colleagues. So the people that I served with, graduated from the Naval Academy with, and when I was in command, they're now going to their second and third sequential commands, just much like Captain Crozier. And I'm hearing from those people that loyalty goes up and down the chain of command, and they are questioning, why should they go out there? Why should they go out there and be in these roles of leadership when the leaders at the top are not going to be behind them when they have to make these tough decisions?
You just noted something that it's worth just sort of pointing out to people, which is that the acting Secretary of the Navy flew, in the midst of a pandemic, flew 8,000 miles to the ship in Guam to deliver this message in person, which itself is just sort of a shocking and stunning action given everything that's going on.
You're correct. It is shocking, and Guam is not an easy place to get to, and this took up a considerable amount of his time to go there and in person make these disparaging remarks of the captain of this ship, who was much beloved and put himself out there for this crew. And I'm not here to defend, the way in which the letter was sent out and those actions, but we're beyond that at this point. And, that crew needs reassuring words from their leadership at the top of the Navy all the way down to the next commanding officer that will serve there and take Captain Crozier's place. And I can tell you from my own experience, any new commanding officer coming into a ship, it's hard to come in behind someone and pick up and build that trust and confidence of the crew. And the crew of the Theodore Roosevelt it's going to be difficult for that next commanding officer to come in behind him, and it's going to be difficult for all those officers who are in these roles of responsibility to trust the chain of command to have their back when they have to make tough decisions.
The president today said that the letter is bad because it showed weakness, and we don't like weakness. And the acting secretary said to David Ignatius this: I didn't want to get into a decision where the president would feel that he had to intervene because the Navy couldn't be decisive. If I were president and I saw a commanding officer of a ship exercising such poor judgment, I would be asking why the leadership of the Navy wasn't taking action itself. Of course, the president today now vowing to get involved. What do you make of that he was essentially trying to stop the president from doing something?
Well, I saw that reporting as well. And I think it's very ironic because all of the things that in his interview that Secretary Modly pointed out were weaknesses in Captain Crozier's action, I think were actually taken to the next level by the Secretary himself by flying halfway around the world and then making these, disparaging and ridiculous remarks from anyone in a position of leadership such as his. The whole Navy looks to the Secretary of the Navy for guidance and leadership, and that was not displayed today. And he was pretty naive himself to think that that was not going to be distributed widely and quickly because, going over the 1MC to thousands of sailors, it didn't take very long for the full recording of that announcement to go out.
Final question. A colleague of yours, Congressman Gallego, in an interview with the Times, pointed out something else, just in terms about discipline and the sort of application of it in these different circumstances. There were two Navy destroyers that had fatal accidents in 2017, the John McCain and the Fitzgerald, that killed 17 Americans. And those firings of those captains came after months of investigations. There was some due process there about getting to the bottom of what happened here, and then they were both, I think, relieved of command, whereas this was a matter of days.
That is true, and there was an ongoing investigation. I believe that the CNO, the Chief of Naval Operations, indicated that an investigation surrounding these circumstances would come out today, and I have yet to see that. And I do believe that a further look into the circumstances surrounding the support to the crew of the Theodore Roosevelt is very important. But I think the main focus has got to be right now. We've got to have leadership from the top to the bottom, supporting our commanding officers out there and helping fight this pandemic and make sure that their crews and their sailors stay safe and stay healthy and can return to doing the mission that they're doing. Because we can't overlook that the reason that Theodore Roosevelt is in the Western Pacific and is currently in Guam is, that we have near-peer competitors in China and Russia, and our continued presence, and specifically our aircraft carrier presence in the Western Pacific, is incredibly important for our national defense. And we need to make sure that they stay safe, stay healthy, and we can get the ship back online to doing the job that it is there to do.
Congresswoman Elaine Luria, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.